The execution. The K-Emperor's plasma blade sliced through the sodding 12-year-old girl's neck, her head dropping to the floor with a thud as crimson blood sprayed the Galactic Council chamber. "No, Sarah," the girl's father, Roy Ross, screamed. The grizzled war veteran shoved his way past the insectoid guards, propping to his knees and cradling his daughter's lifeless body. His anguished cries echoed through the hall. Emperor Boron sneered down from his throne. The human child was trespassing on the sacred K-Toon world. The punishment for such blasphemy is death. Roy looked up, tear-filled eyes burning with pure hatred. She was an innocent little girl exploring ruins out of curiosity. You murdered her in cold blood without even a trial. Your sentimental display only highlights why you humans are a weak, inferior species. Guards, remove this blubbering fool from my sight. Boron waved his clawed hand dismissively. As the K-soldiers dragged Roy away from Sarah's body, he locked eyes with Boron. "You have no idea what you've unleashed, you son of a bitch. Humanity will rain vengeance down upon the K like nothing you can imagine. I will dedicate every remaining moment of my life to hunting you down and watching you die painfully and slowly." Boron only laughed mockingly as Roy was pulled from the room, but some of the other alien counselors shifted uneasily and muttered to each other. "Did you see the look in that human's eyes? He's not going to stop until the Emperor is dead. I've seen humans fight before. Their tenacity is legendary. A single human seeking vengeance is more dangerous than an army. We should have just imprisoned the girl. What if the humans declare total war on the K?" Silence. Boron slammed his fist on his throne. "I will not cower before apes. Let them come." As Roy was thrown out of the citadel, Sarah's blood still coating his hands, he walked calmly to his ship and set a course for Earth. The moment the news of his daughter's murder reached humanity, it would mean the end of the K or the end of mankind. This was a fight for survival now. The only question was who would be the last one standing, and who would be praying for mercy it would never come. The plan. Roy's ship landed on Earth, the weight of his grief and rage bearing down on him like a collapsing star. He strode into the Earth Defense Council chamber, his eyes hard as steel. The council members looked up as he entered, some with sympathy, others with trepidation. "I demand justice for my daughter's murder," Roy said, his voice raw. "The K-Emperor executed her in cold blood without trial or mercy. We cannot let this stand." Admiral Covert, a battle-hardened veteran, leaned forward. "We are all outraged by this atrocity, Roy, but the K are technologically superior. A war could mean the end of humanity." Roy slammed his fist on the table, the bang echoing through the room. "They think we're weak, that we'll just cower in fear and accept this injustice. But they don't know the depths of human resolve. We've faced extinction before, and we've always emerged stronger. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you awaken the sleeping giant of humanity." The council members looked at each other, some nodding in agreement, others still hesitant. They deliberated for hours, weighing the risks and rewards of war. In the end, they turned to Roy. "What do you propose?" Admiral Covert asked. Roy brought up a hologram of a moon orbiting a gas giant. "This is Thax Prime. It's where the K mine the helium-3 that fuels their fusion reactors and powers their empire. If we can destroy those mines, we'll deal a devastating blow to their economy and military." The council members studied the hologram, murmuring to each other. Finally, Admiral Covert stood. "It's a bold plan, risky, but it could work. Roy, you'll lead the strike force. Assemble your team and begin training immediately. We'll provide whatever resources you need." Roy nodded, a grim smile on his face. "I already have a few candidates in mind. Soldiers with the skills and the motivation to make the K pay." As the meeting adjourned, Roy walked out, his mind already racing with plans. He handpicked his team carefully. Demolitions experts, hackers, sharpshooters, and close-quarters combat specialists. Each had lost someone to the K or had a personal vendetta against the insectoid empire. They trained in secret, studying K weapons, tactics, and weaknesses. They'd ran simulations of the mines, planning their infiltration and sabotage down to the last detail. Roy knew they were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had the element of surprise, and more importantly, they had the burning desire for vengeance driving them. The K had no idea what was coming. The Helium-3 mines on Thax Prime were about to become a crucible where the future of humanity would be forged in blood and fire. Roy just hoped that when the encrypted message from the mysterious Zekor first reached the Terran strike team's comms array, he would be ready to trust an alien. The betrayal. Roy eyed the blinking light on the console suspiciously, his finger hovering over the delete button, ready to purge what was surely some K trick. But something stayed his hand. He tapped the message, and a holographic image of an insectoid face shimmered into view. The K's compound eyes gleamed with intelligence, but there was a weariness etched into its carapace that spoke of deep, unrelenting sorrow. This was no arrogant K-warrior. Commander Roy Ross, I am Zekor, once a chief scientist of the K Empire. I offer you my aid in your mission against Thax Prime. I know you have no reason to trust me. You're damn right, I don't trust you, Roy growled. Your kind murdered my daughter. Zekor closed his eyes. I too have lost a daughter to the cruelty of my own people. She refused to take part in the extermination of the Vu, a peaceful race who had done us no wrong. For her defiance, the Emperor had her put to death. The K's voice cracked with grief. I see in your mission a chance to honor my daughter's memory, a chance to strike back against the tyranny that has corrupted my species. I will give you everything. The mine's layout, guard rotations, security codes. Just let me help you destroy them. Roy studied the alien's face, searching for any hint of deception. He found only pain and fierce determination, emotions he knew all too well. Slowly, he nodded. Send us the intel, but if this is a trap, I'll personally rip your head from your thorax. With Zekor's schematics, the strike team drilled on a perfect holographic replica of the mines. They memorized every tunnel, every choke point, every hiding spot. Stolen K cloaking devices were grafted onto their armor, rendering them invisible to the guards' infrared vision. Roy split the team into squads, each tasked with planting a quantum fission charge in a critical junction of the mine complex. Properly placed, the explosives would vaporize the reactive helium-3 in a cataclysmic chain reaction. As the day of the mission approached, Roy sequestered himself in his quarters, poring over every detail of the plan. He hardly noticed when the door hissed open. Dad, I want in. Roy looked up sharply. Jack stood in the doorway, jaw set with iron determination that was all too familiar. Roy shook his head. No, it's too dangerous. I already lost your sister. I won't lose you too. Sarah was my sister. Jax's shout rang off the bulkheads. You think you're the only one who gets to avenge her. This isn't about revenge. It's about stopping the K before they can hurt anyone else. Bullshit. Revenge is all you care about. But this time you need me. Jax threw a data pad on the desk. Schematics of the mine's security systems scrolled across the screen. I can hack their alarms, their blast doors, their auto turrets. You need me in there. Roy gritted his teeth, a vein pulsing in his forehead. But as much as he hated to admit it, Jax was right. Finally, he relented. You follow my orders to the letter, understand? No heroics, no risks. Jax nodded, a fierce light in his eyes. I'll make you proud, Dad. For Sarah, the infiltration. The strike ship sliced through the void, a matte black dagger invisible to K sensors. The mood was grim and quiet, each soldier alone with their thoughts and the faces of their lost loved ones. Suddenly, the comms crackled to life. The withered visage of Emperor Boron leered at them from the view screen. Foolish humans, he sneered, mandibles clicking with disdain. You think you can challenge the might of the K Empire? You'll soon learn the price of your arrogance. Roy said nothing, just stared back with eyes cold as the depths of space. The screen went dark. He turned to face his team, assembled in the drop bay. Jax's fingers danced over the keys of his cyber warfare rig. Zara, the demo expert, hefted a bandolier of quantum charges. Grok, the Cajun mercenary, prepping his plasma cannon. A dozen others, each hand-picked for their skills and thirst for payback. The infiltration. Roy took a deep breath. No inspirational speeches, no stirring rhetoric. They all knew what they had to do, what they were willing to sacrifice. The light turned green, the drop doors yawned open, and Thax Prime loomed below. The helium-3 mines glinted on its barren surface like a poison dagger aimed at the heart of the galaxy. Roy checked his rifle one last time and stepped to the edge of the drop ramp. It was time to show the K what humans were truly capable of. It was time to go to war. The obsidian depths of space around Thax Prime erupted into a maelstrom of plasma fire and searing lasers. Jax's diversionary strike force wove their nimble craft through the K warship's deadly onslaught, strafing the larger vessel's weapon batteries and engine ports. Iridescent explosions bloomed across the void as the human fighters' precision strikes found their marks. The K fleet retaliated with a storm of crackling plasma torpedoes that homed in on the human ships. Several fighters vanished in blinding flashes of light, their valiant pilots vaporized instantly. Jax gritted his teeth as he saw his comrades fall, but he never relented in his assault. His fingers danced across the control panel, sending his ship into a dizzying spiral to evade the incoming fire. At the last second, he cut his thrusters and fired his plasma cannons, raking across a K-destroyer's hull and setting off a chain reaction in its ammunition stores. Meanwhile, deep within the bowels of the helium-3 mines, Roy and his infiltration team crept through the labyrinthine tunnels, following Zakor's schematics to the critical junctures. They moved with practiced efficiency, covering each other as they leapfrogged from one position to the next. At each designated point, Zara planted a quantum charge, arming the detonator with a series of rapid keystrokes. The devices hummed with barely contained destructive power, their status lights blinking an ominous red. Just as they were approaching the final target, an ear-splitting alarm reverberated through the tunnels. Roy swore under his breath. They had been detected. "All units, fall back to the extraction point," he barked into his comm. "We've been compromised." The humans began a fighting retreat, leapfrogging back through the tunnels as they traded fire with the K security forces swarming towards them. The air crackled with the exchange of plasma bolts, and the acrid scent of scorched metal filled the tunnels. Roy took point, his rifle snapping from target to target with lethal precision. K warriors crumpled, their exoskeletons shattered by the high-velocity rounds. But for every insectoid Roy cut down, 3 more seemed to take its place. The K pressed their assault with the fanatical zeal of a species that had never known defeat. Just as the humans were about to be overrun, Jax's panicked voice burst from Roy's earpiece. "Dad, we've got a problem. The K have called in reinforcements, and we're taking heavy losses. We can't hold them off much longer." Roy's heart clenched at the desperation in his son's voice, but he forced himself to focus on the mission. They were too close to turn back now. "Jax, you need to pull out. Regroup with the rest of the team at the fallback point." "But Dad, what about?" "That's an order," Roy snapped. "I'll handle things here." He turned to his soldiers, their faces grim beneath their helmets. "We've come too far to fail now. We'll hold the line and make sure those charges go off, no matter what." The humans nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the sacrifice they might be called upon to make. They took up defensive positions, pouring fire into the advancing K horde. Roy stood at the center of the line, a bulwark against the insectoid tide. His rifle bucked in his hands as he sent a fusillade of plasma into the enemy ranks. The ground grew slick with the ichor oozing from shattered K carapaces, but still they came, heedless of their losses, driven by a single-minded hunger for human blood. Roy knew they couldn't hold out forever, but they would hold long enough for Jax and the others to escape. long enough for the charges to detonate and cripple the K's ability to wage war, long enough to avenge Shara and all the other victims of the K's cruelty. Roy ejected his spent power cell and slammed home a fresh one. Around him, his soldiers fought with the ferocity of cornered wolves, refusing to yield an inch. The fate of humanity would be decided here, in the blood-soaked tunnels of Fax Prime, and the K would learn the true cost of their arrogance. The Battle of Fax Prime. As the battle raged in the tunnels, Zakor's long fingers flew over a holographic control panel. His multifaceted eyes reflected lines of scrolling code as he hacked into the K communication network. With a final decisive keystroke, he broadcast his message across every view screen and audio channel in the K fleet. The K soldiers faltered as Zakor's face appeared before them, his voice resonating through their helmets. He spoke of the countless atrocities committed in the name of K superiority, of entire species wiped out, of worlds left barren and lifeless. He laid bare the cruelty of Emperor Boron and the lies that had been fed to the K people. In the mines below, Roy and his team pressed their advantage as confusion rippled through the K ranks. Some soldiers lowered their weapons, doubt etched on their insectoid faces. Others turned their plasma rifles on their own commanders, their loyalty to the Emperor shattered by Zakor's revelations. Amid the chaos, a young cave officer named Turok rallied a group of defectors. With a series of quick hand signals, he led them to join forces with the humans. Roy eyed the K warily, but Turok met his gaze with a solemn nod. Together, the unlikely allies fought their way deeper into the mines, toward the central control room. Roy and Turok took point, their respective teams covering each other with interlocking fields of fire. Plasma bolts crisscrossed the tunnels, the air thick with the stench of ozone and burnt chitin. As they neared their objective, a massive hologram of Emperor Boron flickered to life before them. The K ruler's face was contorted with rage, his mandibles quivering. "Foolish humans," he spat. "Did you think your pathetic rebellion could succeed? I hold the lives of your comrades in my claws." The image shifted to reveal Jax and the captured humans, bound and beaten, plasma rifles aimed at their heads. Royd's heart seized in his chest. "Surrender now," Boron hissed, "or watch them die." Roy hesitated, torn between his mission and his son. But Jax, his face bloody but his spirit unbroken, shouted defiantly, "Don't you dare give up, Dad. Finish this, no matter what happens to me." Roy's jaw tightened, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on his face. He turned to Turok, his voice steady. "Do it." The K officer nodded grimly and input the detonation code. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the world erupted in fire. Explosions chained through the mines, each charge igniting the volatile helium-3. The ground heaved and bucked, throwing Roy and the others from their feet. On the surface, geysers of flame burst from the moon's crust, engulfing the K ships in a hellish inferno. In the chaos, Roy struggled to his feet, his ears ringing. He rallied his team and their K allies, leading them in a desperate charge toward the surface. They emerged onto a hellscape of twisted metal and burning wreckage. The once mighty K fleet reduced to smoldering husks. But there was no time to celebrate. Roy's eyes locked onto a heavily fortified bunker, swarming with Boron's elite guard. Jax was in there somewhere. With a battle cry that echoed across the ravaged landscape, Roy led the charge. Plasma fire ripped through the air as the two sides clashed, neither giving quarter. Soldiers fell on both sides, their blood mingling on the scorched ground. Roy fought like a man possessed, his plasma blade carving a path through the Emperor's guard. He had to reach Jax, had to save his son. At last, he stood before Boron himself, the Emperor's once resplendent armor dented and scorched. The K ruler snarled, drawing his own plasma blade. "You've taken everything from me," Roy roared, lunging forward. Their blades clashed in a blinding flare of energy, the air sizzling with each strike. They traded blows in a furious dance, neither able to gain the upper hand. But Roy's rage and grief fueled him, driving him to fight harder, faster. With a final desperate thrust, he plunged his blade into Boron's chest. The Emperor staggered back, his compound eyes wide with shock. He crumpled to the ground, ichor pooling beneath his ruined body. Roy stood over his foe, chest heaving, tears streaming down his face. He had avenged Sarah, but at what cost? He turned to search for Jax among the chaos of the battle, praying that his son had survived. The Alliance. Roy stood amid the smoldering ruins of the Helium-3 mines, his plasma rifle still smoking. Jax lay on the ground nearby, battered but alive. Tarek and the other K. *** Part 6. The Alliance. Continued ***. Defectors were tending to the wounded. Roy reached down and pulled his son to his feet. Jax winced but managed a grim smile. "We did it, Dad. We won." Roy shook his head. "It's not over yet. The real fight is just beginning." As if on cue, Roy's comlink crackled to life. It was Admiral Covert, her voice tight with urgency. "Roy, we're getting reports of uprisings on dozens of K colonies. Zaker's message has spread like wildfire. The K Empire is in chaos." Roy's grip tightened on his rifle. "Then it's time to strike while the iron is hot. We need to support these rebellions, arm the defectors, and keep the pressure on what's left of Boron's regime." Over the next weeks, Roy, Jax, and Tarek led a series of lightning raids on K military bases and supply depots. They struck hard and fast, seizing weapons and equipment before vanishing into the void. On the planet Xerxes Prime, Roy and his team infiltrated a heavily guarded armory. Jax hacked the security systems, opening the blast doors and disabling the auto turrets. Roy and Tarek stormed inside, plasma bolts flying as they cut down the K guards. They loaded crates of plasma rifles and quantum grenades onto their waiting ship. As they lifted off, K fighters screamed toward them, cannons blazing. Jax swung the ship's turret around and returned fire, the void lighting up with crisscrossing beams of deadly energy. Elsewhere, Tarek led a sabotage mission on a key K communication hub. They planted explosives on the towering transmission arrays and power generators. As they detonated the charges, the entire facility erupted in a blinding fireball visible from orbit. With each successful mission, more and more K flocked to the rebellion's banner. But the Loyalists, though weakened, refused to surrender. They retreated to their fortified homeworld of Cax, determined to make their final stand. The rebel fleet, a ragtag armada of human warships and retrofitted K vessels, dropped out of warp at the edge of the Cax system. The planet glowed like a baleful ember, its surface bristling with plasma cannons and missile batteries. As the battle raged in orbit, Roy and his team made planetfall in a battered dropship. They fought their way through the war-torn streets of the capital city, the air thick with smoke and the stench of burnt flesh. K Loyalists defended every block with fanatical zeal, but the rebels pressed on, bolstered by human air support and armor. Roy led the charge, his plasma blade carving a path through the enemy lines. In the midst of the chaos, Roy's comlink pinged with an incoming message from Zakor. The K scientist's face was haggard, his compound eyes filled with dread. "Roy, I've uncovered something terrible." Emperor Boron was not acting alone. He was merely a pawn of a much larger conspiracy, a shadowy organization known as the Galactic Syndicate. Roy felt a chill run down his spine as Zakor continued. "The Syndicate has been manipulating galactic events for centuries, pulling the strings of governments and corporations alike. They see the K Rebellion and humanity's rise as threats to their power. They will stop at nothing to maintain their grip on the galaxy." Roy's jaw tightened as the implications sank in. Even if they won here on Cax, the real enemy was still out there, lurking in the shadows. He turned to Jax and Tarek, his eyes hard with determination. "We've come this far. We're not stopping now. Once we've crushed these Loyalists, we're going after the Syndicate. We'll expose their crimes and bring them to justice, no matter what it takes." As the battle raged around them, Roy knew that this was just the beginning of a much larger war, a war for the soul of the galaxy itself, and he would fight it to his last breath. The final showdown. Roy's heart pounded as he read the distress call from the Zoran colony. The Syndicate mercenaries were ruthless, slaughtering civilians and burning cities. He couldn't abandon the Zorans to their fate. Roy turned to Jax and Turok. I need you two to lead the final assault on the K homeworld. Take the rebel forces and crush what's left of Boron's loyalists. Jax nodded, his jaw set with determination. We'll finish this, Dad. The K Empire dies today. Roy clasped his son's shoulder. I know you will, but I have to go to the Zorans. They're critical allies, and we can't let the Syndicate have them. He assembled a strike team of his most elite soldiers, both human and K. They boarded a stealth ship and raced toward the besieged Zoran system. As they dropped out of warp, the scale of the devastation became clear. Zoran ships lay shattered and burning, drifting lifelessly. The colony's defense platforms were reduced to molten slag, and in the midst of it all, the Syndicate fleet hung like a swarm of locusts, raining death upon the planet below. Roy gritted his teeth. Take us in fast and low. We need to get boots on the ground. The strike team landed amidst the rubble of a shattered Zoran city. Plasma fire ripped through the air as the Syndicate mercenaries clashed with the desperate Zoran defenders. Roy led the charge, his rifle blazing. His team followed close behind, taking up defensive positions around huddled groups of Zoran civilians. But for every mercenary they cut down, 3 more seemed to take their place. The Syndicate troops were heavily armed and well-equipped, their armor shrugging off blaster fire. Roy watched in despair as his soldiers fell one by one, their blood staining the rubble. They were being overrun, and the civilians were paying the price. In a last desperate gambit, Roy fought his way to the Zoran command center. He burst inside, finding a scene of controlled chaos. Zoran engineers worked frantically at consoles, trying to coordinate their failing defenses. At the center of it all stood an aged Zoran, his exoskeleton gleaming with implanted tech. He turned as Roy approached, compound eyes whirring and clicking. I am Zorak, prime engineer of this colony. His voice was a buzz of static. You must be Commander Ross. Your reputation precedes you. Roy holstered his rifle. Zorak, we're here to help, but my team is being slaughtered out there. The Syndicate mercs have us outgunned. We need your help. Zorak clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. I did not wish to involve my people in your war, Commander. We are builders, not soldiers. Roy slammed his fist on the console, desperation etched on his face. Damn it, Zorak. This is your war too. The Syndicate won't stop with us. They'll enslave your people just like they've done to countless others. Please, help us fight them. Help me save both our peoples. There was a long moment of silence. Then slowly, Zorak nodded. Very well, Commander. I cannot sit idly by while others fight for our freedom. He turned to his engineers. Bring out the EMP cannon and the plasma lances. It's time we showed these mercenaries what Zoran science can do. Minutes later, Roy stood atop the command center, a bulky Zoran EMP cannon resting on his shoulder. His remaining soldiers took up positions around him, wielding strange angular Zoran weapons. Zorak's voice crackled over the comm. The EMP blast will disable their ships and weapons, but only for a short time. You must strike hard and fast. Roy braced himself. Fire. A pulse of crackling blue energy erupted from the cannon, washing over the Syndicate forces. Their ships dropped from the sky, crashing into the rubble. The mercenaries' advanced rifles sputtered and died in their hands. Roy roared a battle cry and charge, his team close behind. The plasma lances in their hands fired searing bolts of energy, punching through the mercenaries' armor like it was paper. The battle was fierce and bloody, but with the playing field leveled, Roy's soldiers cut through the Syndicate ranks. The mercenaries, used to relying on their technological advantage, were thrown into disarray by the sudden loss of their gear. The fight raged for hours, the streets of the Zoran city running red with blood and echoing with the cries of the wounded and dying. But in the end, the Syndicate forces broke and ran, fleeing back to their ships in disarray. As the last mercenary vessel limped away, trailing smoke and sparks, a ragged cheer went up from Roy's soldiers and the Zoran defenders. They had won. The colony was safe. Zorak approached Roy, his exoskeleton scorched and dented, but his eyes shining with fierce pride. He clasped Roy's hand in his own, the cold metal of his digits pressing into Roy's flesh. "You have saved my people, Commander Ross. We owe you a debt that can never be repaid." Roy shook his head. "You owe us nothing, Zorak. We're in this fight together now. The Syndicate is the real enemy, and we're going to need all the help we can get to bring them down." Zorak nodded, his mandibles clicking. "The Zoran Collective stands with you, Commander. Our weapons, our ships, our brightest minds, all are at your disposal. Together, we will rid the galaxy of the Syndicate